Today's episode is a bonus guest edition episode. It was unplanned. I've had some help with my business, and I thought, you know what, this is a great person to bring onto the show. My guest today is a comedy writer, performer with a speciality in songwriting and music production. He has written, directed, and performed in viral videos that have been featured by the Huntington Post, Funny or Die, CAF, Medium, and Broadway World with over 14 million views. Welcome to the show, Adam Blotner.
Thank you for having me.
Appreciate you coming on. It's amazing. We've done some work around getting a bit more advertising and branding for my podcast. And as I've got some great jingles from you, which will be featured on today's show, we're going to slowly build out the podcast with a bit more of a professional spin. I've heard a few comedy podcasts, things like The Office, you know, the American version of The Office. They do a podcast. Brian Baumgartner actually does an Office where he looks at each episode and speaks to different actors and characters. And he had a similar type of setup, which I really liked. And I was like, oh, that would be really good, because working for yourself, it's an area where all of us do something or another. So I wanted to speak to you today, especially around your background, how you've started, the things you're doing, because you've got some great projects on today that you've been working on. So I wanted you to tell me a little bit more about this work that you're doing with the Huntington Post, Funny or Die, and the 14 million views. How did that come about?
So, well, thank you for having me on today, and you know, it's fun to be able to do this and connect with often folks I work with. It's just faceless and nameless, so it's nice to be able to connect. I've been at this for a long time, and had my feet in a lot of different things, but the videos, the stuff you were mentioning, a lot of it was from I was doing work with a political satire, uh, doing political satire for a company called Twit, The Week in Trump. So as much of a lot of media really, benefited from that era, I did too. So it was a lot of political satire, and that stuff was just taking off at the time. And a lot of it was musical satire. Um, there was I did a number of comedic music videos that have also, those were features in Huffington Post and Funny or Die, and satirical music videos. And there was, at the beginning of the pandemic, I did a satirical pandemic charity relief single called "We Are the Ones." I mean, it was a parody of, anytime there were these world health crises, like in the 80s, and there were these charity relief singles, and my song was like, well, now we've got the disease, and now it's on us. And so some of those were, it was really the topical stuff, that got the most features.
Wow, that sounds great. And back in 2007, you were working in Universal Studios as a guide. So how much of a difference is that from what you were doing to what you're doing now? How did you find that journey?
So that was right at the beginning of my career, and I was living in LA, and looking for work, looking for a day job, and saw that Universal Studios was hiring, and it was a dream job for me. I had done that, the Tram tour. Have you ever been on that?
No.
Oh, it's really, have you probably seen it in movies?
Yeah.
They go by and the big King Kong, and
Yeah.
so it was a lot of fun. It was, really demanding kind of job. It was all day and in the heat, and hundreds of tourists coming through, and sometimes we'd get stuck, at one attraction. This was, a while ago, but sometimes the stuff would break down, so you just have to drag it out and make stuff up. And so there was a lot to memorize, and I just had a whole lot of movie knowledge I just had to be able to pull from at the time. So now, almost entirely working for myself, to tie it back
Yeah.
here with you and your topics, it's much nicer doing that, and definitely a luxury.
Definitely. So, with the audience we have here, mainly concentrating on either getting out of their office job if they're working like a 9 to 5 and looking to set up their own company or even start something themselves. There's loads of different people out there. For example, I started with photography, went into video and do a lot of online content creation. With yourself, you started as a Universal Studio guide, but now you've gone into an area where it's quite tough to get into. So creative jobs themselves tend to be quite tough to get into. So how did you get your break into this music career and this producing, and how did that come about for you?
Well, there never was a break. It was it's just been a lot of work and a lot of hard work. And I was taking at the time that I was working at Universal Studios, I was taking classes at the Groundlings, which is a comedy theater in LA, and a lot of Saturday Night Live alum have come from there. And so I was there. I started doing musical comedy, and then was just doing my own shows. And I've been working. I was doing a lot of music in schools, preschools, that kind of thing, because that's where musicians. That's one place where musicians can get paid, to do what they do. Um, and it really was a long road towards building my own, sustainable business. And there wasn't really a break. I really think it's just been about the way that any business is built, which is just planning to take losses at first. And I haven't quantified it, but I put in a lot to start. And whether it was time or money, or just taking a risk or a leap, away from doing more secure types of work. But all of that is an investment, and so I've just been investing and investing in it. And each thing that sort of seemed like, what am I doing? And this is pointless, and I'm losing money on this, or this is a risk, and I don't know. It ends up kind of all coming together, and one thing builds on the next thing. And so if you get one opportunity with a big client, then that makes that next big client just that much more, comfortable and willing to trust you to handle their project.
Definitely. And you mentioned a little bit there about how you started. When you got into music, did you have a choice? Did you have something else that you had in mind that you might do, or was it you were set on in the music industry?
I really started with focus in comedy and sketch comedy and improvisational comedy. And it was at the Groundlings where it was such a wonderful experience there. And I had so much fun. And we had an assignment from one of our writing instructors to use a talent or skill that we had, and separate from sketch writing, and build that into a sketch. And I wrote this sketch about these two like wannabe Jonas brothers. This is 2006.
Mhm.
These two like wannabe Jonas brothers guys, and it was these kind of knockoff Jonas brothers songs. And I did this at the show and performed with there's a house band that's there, and they accompanied me. And it was just, the whole thing popped in a way that I was like, this is it. This is what I want to be doing. And so there was no looking back after that. Then it was really just a total focus on musical comedy. And those things have always been both at the same time for me.
So you've done quite a lot of work over the years with different clients. You've done things with Google, you've done things with Land Rover through your gigs. Is there anything that you think has got you to that level? Something memorable that you can pin it back to? For example, I did this, which led to me being successful now.
um I think it really was. I think that people look for credibility, and that's the thing that you want to build. And the way I built it on Fiverr, I would like to say there was a big break, but it just wasn't like that. I mean, it was just little pieces. It was a lot of little things that I built up. It was just doing on Fiverr. Now I'm connecting with much bigger clients. When I first started, really all it was about was pricing competitively, um, doing great work that people are happy with, so you get the good ratings. And Fiverr allowed for, once you can get those ratings, if people see enough 5 stars on there, it doesn't matter who gave those 5 stars, the quantity of it, like anything that you buy, gives you a trustworthiness, and people believe, okay, I'm going to take a leap and do something with this. And also with Fiverr, getting involved in their pro designation was a big leap for me. To be able to get into that program, and for people to see, okay, this is something that's professional and stands out in a way. So it was really from there that I got to connect to bigger clients. It really just was doing good work and getting the ratings for it.
I'm so glad you mentioned that because a lot of the times I get a lot of questions from the guests and audience from the podcast about what's that special ticket to get where I want to be. But like you mentioned, it builds up over time. You don't notice that you're getting there. You're continually on the journey. Everything builds up slowly. One day you're doing a small client, that client mentions it to somebody else, then you've got a bigger client. But in essential, you're treating every customer with the most you can give. So you're always giving 100%. So whether it's a really good client or a lower playing client, they're getting a same good quality service. But it's just you slowly build on that. So when you look back sometimes, it's good to see that, oh, look where I was and look where I am. That's the only time we ever notice it, because we're always on that churning wheel of carrying on for the next big thing. So I'm glad that you've got that same view, and it will help our audience to hear this, that keep at it, don't give up, carry on focusing on what you want to do, and that will help you to get bigger clients, good clients. But the main thing is give them great customer service and give them what they want. So in your example, you're working on Fiverr, you're making gigs. I've approached 3 separate people to get what I wanted. I basically wanted a jingle for my podcast, which you would have heard at the start of this, and that was made by Adam for me. So that was a great little addition that gives you a bit of extra. Well, it sounds really good actually. The way when I heard it, it's got a nice deep voice to it. I like the extra background music. So we've now basically made our podcast a professional podcast, because we've got extra elements, extra audio and visual, because we do video as well. So if you ever are checking out, make sure to check out zulftalks.com, where you can see the video version and all of our podcast, which is available everywhere you want to listen to it. And with your work, you mentioned there about getting the Pro Fiverr. Is that an extra step that you did, or does that need extra qualifications, or how does that work?
Yes, yeah, they have you can apply for their pro designation, and I was told that, I mean, less than 1% of applicants to it, get accepted. So you have to have certain qualifications, and they're specific to your field of expertise. um, and you apply for that program. There's also certain things you have to be somewhat new to Fiverr to do it. You can't. At least this is what it was,
Mm.
a few years ago when I joined it. But they ask you to submit work. They ask you to submit, places you've worked for, and things you've done, and then they from that will, uh, you know, designate if if you're pro or not.
Okay, so I think that was a big factor for me. So what I did was, I don't use Fiverr a lot. I looked at trying to get creative clients. I was like, where can I find music? And I asked a couple of my friends, but I wanted something. When you ask friends, they normally do you a favor and like, oh yeah, that's fine, I'll do it for you. But I wanted it to be a business transaction. I said, I want a service, I want to pay for it, I want to make sure that the person who's doing the work is getting paid for it. I don't want a favor. So that's why I ended up going to Fiverr. And then I looked at the search criteria. I ticked the pro option because I thought, you know what, I want a professional. I don't want to have to. There's quite a few people that do lower price gigs that maybe are starting in the industry and maybe practicing and wanting some, which is also relevant, which is why I also did a cheap gig to give someone else a chance that, you know what, you can use it in your portfolio to say you've made a podcast jingle. So it helps you out as well. I did a mid option, and then I did a higher option, which is your pro option. And I'm glad I did that, because if I didn't do that, I wouldn't have known the difference between the cheap versus the expensive, because the production value in yours was superior to the cheaper ones, because you can tell you've spent more time on the lyrics, the multiple versions of lyrics, because you've got 3 separate sections on. Is it 3 or 4?
I think there were 3
3, yeah.
stanzas.
So
Yeah.
yeah, so you referred to him as stanzas.
Yeah.
So is that the musical term for, like, in terms of like a poem? It's like a section.
I wouldn't be able to speak for anyone else
Okay.
besides my own approach. That's how I think of it.
Okay, that makes sense, because I looked at it and I was able to see, okay, there's 3 separate clear, and yours was longer. Also, when you made yours, it had that twist on it, which was good for me, because I liked the professional spin on it, because you mentioned my website, you mentioned more of like an advert. So that gave me a insight that actually, if I heard this on the TV, it sounds really good. So that was a good thing there, especially now that I know that Pro made a difference for that, because obviously you've worked with clients that would have a marketing team that would need to have that kind of layout to make sure they're getting the best, well, return from their investment. So that made really good sense. I wanted to add a few more points I wanted to speak to you about. So understanding the music business, is it the same if you to make a podcast jingle or you make a comedy song? Is that like the same process in terms of how you go about it, or is there more behind it?
It's generally the same process. Yeah, I mean, so I started off on Fiverr really just with a focus on comedy. I was doing funny jingles and found that from that the funny jingles gigs that I was doing, I was getting almost, half of the clients were people who didn't want anything comedic, but they liked the sound,
Yeah.
and the approach. And I found it's the same thing, just comedy is a little harder to do.
Yes.
But, it's the same process of what's the idea that I'm trying to get across, or a brand name. It's really kind of a story or a concept. What's the idea and what's the feeling behind it? And then for comedy, that there's usually something that's in contrast, or an irony, something that's at odds there. And for non-comedy, you're just purely trying to get across the idea. But I build the songs the same way.
Okay, so if we go back to my lyrics, do you remember what thought process you went through when you were setting them up? Because you had some good points there, which met with my like the way we do our podcast. So did you do any background research, or did you go? How did it conspire?
Well, I mean, what I do on, so your listeners know on Fiverr, I provide a questionnaire to any clients that come to me, and I say, what points of information, what is the name of your
Yeah,
brand or business, what are points of information that need to get across, because usually we're talking about 15 to 30 seconds,
yeah.
so it's really important to know we can only fit so many things in there. So what's critical to get across, and do you have any musical preferences? Um, and you had made it very clear, of what you'd like included. So um I did additional research, and looked at what you did and the general tone of it. And um but I really was just drawing from what you had put in the questionnaire, mostly of here's the concepts that need to get across. And what I'll often do is, because I know I can fit usually kind of two to four rhymes in there, is I'll and the rhyme at the end of the word, that's the punch. In
Yeah.
in comedy, that's the punchline. And in not comedy, that's still the punchline. That's still the piece of information that hits. So, so I'll look at something that you do, a client I'm working with, I'll look at, maybe what are some rhymes, what are some basic ideas, and then rhymes. And if I can't rhyme yourself, for yours, what's a sort of, what is the most important concept that I want to get across? How can I say that rhythmically, and then I'll try to rhyme to that.
Okay, that's a good point. Um, so if you're listening today and you're hearing this, that's like a trade secret there, basically, what Adam has shared with us, because he's telling us if you ask for the right information, it makes your job easier to be able to deliver what the customer wants. So if you're thinking about going into the music industry or even making something creative for someone, a thumbnail, a video, a jingle, and keyboard music, saxophone, if you can set up your form in a way that it makes sure you get all the information. Because when I went to Adam's Fiverr, he asked me what I wanted, and also knowing what you want is quite important. So you need to be specific that, you know what, I like this, I want something like this, make sure you include XYZ. Because if you say something like, if I'll know when I hear it, that's not going to give anybody any help. So you need to be specific with that. And that works in across industry. So as long as you understand what the customer wants, you'll know what you want to deliver. That way it makes it easier for everybody, less iterations, less changes. A few little changes can be possible, like the speed or the pace of it may be a bit different, that's fine. But too much big changes, you don't want to make it harder for anybody, so make it as easy as possible. And out of the gigs, out of all three, I think only two asked the right questions. A couple of the other ones were like, they give you more. So one of them gave me like 12 versions of some type of jingle. And that made me think, okay, that's fine. But now I have to make a choice out of 12. Which one do I keep? So I want it to be like, just give me one version and that's fine. Adam, if I was to say to you, I wanted to make another one and I wanted to give you creative freedom, what would you do differently on my jingle?
Well, with yours, I think you had a very specific musical idea
Yes.
in
Yeah.
mind, and so that was what it really hinged on.
Yeah.
That was what I was trying to hit a musical sense. So if I were to approach it differently, I- I'd say number one, changing the musical approach,
Okay.
would be the first thing that I would do.
Okay.
Um, I just go far in the other direction, whatever the opposite of, mellow jazz
Okay.
is, I don't know, like something EDM or something,
Okay. That
if
might be interesting.
yeah,
Can I hire you again to make me that? Because
sure, sure.
I just wanna hear it out of because I'm gonna
Well,
use the one we've got. Because how I think about it is when I'm speaking, I'm not very exciting. I'm very like straight to the point, and most of our topics are professional work related, so it's not very comedy related. So what I was thinking was if I had a really exciting intro and then they hear that and then I speak after it, it might be like a bit of a come down. Oh, wait a minute, I was expecting him to be more high energy. So that's why I kept it at that mid level. But I think I might have a special one for special events when I have like multiple people speaking on the podcast. It is more high energy. I can have like a fun version of it, and I prefer you to do it because you did the first one, and that way I can go between the two or change it up a little bit.
Yeah. So for that, what I would recommend, and I've done this with many clients. A lot of people will come to me, around the holiday season, say, "I love the jingle we have. Can you make like a holiday version? Make it
Oh,
sound Christmassy."
okay.
And really, I mean, musically, you can take any when I'm writing a jingle, yours,
Mm,
anybody's, I write the top line melody first, and that separate from all the music underneath it. I write something that's singable.
okay.
Before we went live, I mean, you were mentioning your kids were singing
Yeah.
it, and that's the idea, and that's for me, the kind of music that I like best, and what works best. So I create something that's singable, and then the music, background music, you can call it, just is there to support it. So we could switch out that, we can keep the same melody, which I think if people get that melody in their head,
Yeah.
you want to keep. We don't want to
Yeah.
change up the melody, but we can change up the instrumentation underneath it, which is really fun way to keep the integrity of the melody and the feel and the sound of it, but change it up. Do a electronic remix of it, or something like that. It's essentially remixes, or different, or you want a country version of it, blues version of it,
Oh.
whatever you want, we can
Oh.
do it.
I think you'd have to do a special package for me where they get like 4 or 5 versions in like a
Yeah,
one thing.
yeah.
Because I'm gonna end up having to take out another mortgage. But yeah, I will work out something. I do want another version of it, so we're gonna work out another version, which would be nice. What's the secret of finding the job that you love? Because right now you enjoy it, I enjoy what I do. Is there a secret you could share with our audience that would help them maybe get to a place where they can get into a job that they enjoy doing?
Well, at the risk of being overly simplistic about it, really my approach has been, here's the thing I love doing. I'm going to monetize it and make work out of it. And that's just not, everybody's hobby, can't necessarily be something that's monetized in that way. And for a lot of people it can. And if you love knitting, and you want to create an Etsy shop, where you knit things, you can do that. And it might not be the money, that you need to
Yes.
live. And so it's also about, those priorities. But um I don't know. I think find uh it's really the biggest thing to do is identify what brings you joy and what you enjoy doing, and find a way that you can do that, find outlets for that, which it might not be as direct. If I like writing songs, I've now built a way that I'm writing the full song and doing the full thing. But there's a lot of songwriters who uh there's other applications. You could do the same thing in multiple applications. So I'd say, for anybody kind of looking for something, work that they want to do, that's joyful and fulfilling. um if you enjoy copywriting, there's 1,000 opportunities for copywriting. So I think just to not be narrow about, to think broadly about, well, where else could copywriting, happen? And maybe it's, writing food descriptions, for a food blog. I don't, that's not my area of
Yes. Yes.
expertise.
So if you have been
But I
listening
think
so far, you will see on screen I was showing Adam's Fiverr Pro page and his website where you can get more information. Also, sorry I interrupted you. I wanted the listeners
No.
to know that the video version we share a little bit more information, so you're able to see that extra gig on the Fiverr page as well. But yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, I think what you're sharing there is it's right. It's finding what you love and trying to make it work for you. It may not make the most money, but if you love it, as long as it pays the bills, what is happiness in the end? Doing what you enjoy. So it's always great to have that side of things work out for you. Now, I wanted to ask you about the voice of Barney the dinosaur. Oh my God, how amazing is that? How long was that going on
Wait,
for?
wait. Uh, so it comes with a funny story. So I had just moved to LA, just started my career out of college, and just bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, as we say, and um, I didn't even have a mattress in my apartment yet, and I was on Craigslist, and which at the time had more legitimacy than it does now. It still wasn't that legitimate, but um, I there was a thing on there for somebody was looking, for there was a studio looking for somebody who could do a voice of Barney the dinosaur, and they had exhausted whatever resources, and I submitted did a thing on my laptop and submitted it, and next thing I know, the next day I'm driving to a studio in Malibu, and I'm like, I've made it. I've been in LA for, I just got here this first week, and I go up there and I'm in the studio, and, I was clearly like, 22 years old. They're like, how long have you been in LA? And I looked at my watch. I was like, 48 hours, and it was these Barney toys and, licensed Barney toys. And I got to have that. It was a wonderful experience and great learning experience of, what it's like being in studio and what those demands are. And it was really fun. And I had to do that laugh over and over again and work very hard at it.
Is it copyrighted? Can we get an example today, or can you not do it?
Um, um, well, I haven't done it in a while, so it's rusty, but I'll do my best. Uh, I I love you, you love me. We're a happy family with a great big hug and a kiss from me to you. Won't you say you love me too?
Oh my God, that is amazing. Did you get one of the dolls? Have you kept some behind for yourself, like as souvenirs?
I don't. I don't have one.
Oh,
No.
that would have been amazing.
No, I mean, they didn't have one, ready for me right there when I left the studio, so
Oh,
it just never happened.
oh, there's your big break. When you have a big break, that's the big break. Regardless of
That's
anything
right.
else, you've done
That's
it.
right. Well, and all the Barney voiceover artists are so there are multiple and they're all so talented. So I wouldn't be able to
Oh,
pick myself out, if I
oh,
heard one. I don't
okay.
think.
That's interesting. It reminds me of Robin Williams when he had all those like voices that he does and things.
Yeah.
Okay, so steps from creating a song to publishing. Would you say if someone came to you with like a full song, or they wanted a full song produced, is that something that you could take on? And what sort of process is that? Like how long time frame would that be?
Yeah, I do that. If you want to pull up the gig page on Fiverr,
Mhm.
I offer full songs. There's one write a funny song in any genre, I think it's called, and I offer 10-day turnaround on that. I think it was
Oh,
there at the top of the page. Um, and it's really the same process as the theme songs or jingles. Um, and so it yeah, around generally depending on what it needs,
mhm.
usually I can do within 10 days.
So that's surprisingly quick. 10 days is like for a full song. That's quite
Yeah,
impressive.
yeah, yeah. It's Fiverr is a tough market, and I know that the way that I'm priced is a lot higher than what's on there. So I try to make compromises in other to be more competitive in areas where I can, and I work quickly. I generally work quickly anyway. So I thought, well, if I'm going to work quickly anyway, then there's people who can that will appeal to.
Yeah, and also luckily on the Fiverr, it's got a few options there which helps break it down because you have like a basic, standard, and premium. And sometimes if you got a custom need, you can always message the seller and say, you know what, I was thinking roughly here, and then how does that sound, and see if you can do a customize where obviously something compromises, so you maybe give them a longer time period or you're not as strict with time frames. So it's great that they give you the option, and that does work out nicely. So I think
Yeah.
overall the experience was quite nice. I don't use skill. I was gonna say Skillshare there. I don't use Fiverr that often for this type of thing, but I find it quite smooth, and I'm lucky that I've got good sellers and professionals. Like for example, you've delivered. I've had a couple of others that I've delivered, so I've not had any like friction, as it were. So it's done quite nicely. In
Yeah.
terms of the process and the copyright side of things, how does that affect the Fiverr gig? As in, you're a creator, do you then give your song to Fiverr and then Fiverr gives it to the buyer? What's the process there?
Well, I won't get too much into it because it's sort of beyond my my pay
Okay.
grade, and Fiverr has also changed how that's set up over time. So it's all covered in the Fiverr terms of service. And generally speaking, most of the things you order on Fiverr are, considered work for hire, which is just full copyright. Everything is given to the buyer. But there are, buyers who will require specific language, that then I will include in the offer, or there's things that I will require. But Fiverr is really a wild west of, um, you buy stuff and it and um, I don't know too much about the copyright, and I'm actually talking with my lawyer tomorrow about
Oh, that's
making
good.
sure that I'm, handling all the copyright stuff
Yeah,
correctly.
because
So
that can be tricky sometimes. Because what happens now is because I live stream to multiple locations, the reason I've brought it because there've been places where you can get royalty free music and there's all these other things that you can do and you can add them in. But I don't want to be in a position where if I play it on my podcast and it's monetized on my YouTube channel, that further down the line I'll get copyrighted or so that's why I thought, I'm gonna go to Fiverr, pay for the premium one and make sure
yeah,
it's got commercial use. So at least I know it belongs to me or the creator you. So that way it's between us rather than some other random company, some other country that's made the song and they said it's free, but then after 2 years they changed their mind, it's no longer free. So if you're working for
yes,
yourself, it's always worth checking the terms of service and making sure what you're using, if it's to do business or to make money from, that either you own it or you know the person who's made it, who's given you the copyright to use it. So that's really important with these types of creations because artistic work and music, it can be tricky because sometimes it can be three or four people that make someone can do the lyrics, someone can do the music, someone can do the backing, and it's like interesting. So when you speak to solicitor, I might have to do another episode with you to see what the outcome was and see if we can share that with the audience.
yes, yeah. Well, and and for the audience too, that's a real, it's a it there's a real yin and yang to, working with a third party website. It's great for like Fiverr or any third party website is great for visibility. And I really love the protections, that are in place. Both it makes the buyer feel comfortable and the
Yeah,
seller feel comfortable, and everything is very clear cut and straightforward. And if you want to know copyright wise what are you getting, you look right there in the terms of service and it's there and there's no question about it, and nobody's going to knock on your door years later and say, I deserve this or whatever, because it's all clear cut. And which, again, for some sellers that might not be the right thing and that might not be the right kind of terms, but I do feel well protected on there, that all I have to focus on is the work itself.
that's good. That's good. And in terms of Fiverr, are you happy using just Fiverr? Have you thought about other options? Are you solely just Fiverr for your creative work, or have you gone outside that to sell services or jingles or things that you would do?
So Fiverr is the only third-party website. Well, actually, I'm also on soundbetter.com and airgigs.com.
Oh, are those
Those have
also similar things where you airgigs.com?
yes, I think it still exists.
Oh, is it something that
Uh,
was in the past? Was it?
I signed up years ago, and air gigs. I think I got one job through there. But it's a different kind of marketplace, and I think the only other sort of comparable thing to Fiverr um, is oh, what is it called? There's one where you bid on. I don't remember the name of it, but I
Oh,
think what I do is so specialized that the other site I'm talking about, which I can't remember the name of, but you people put out a here's what I'm looking for, and
okay.
then sellers can bid on it, and say,
Oh,
well, I'll do this for this amount, I'll do this for this. I think what I do is so specialized that people who need that are I'm the only one who can do it. I
yeah.
mean, they're looking for me and they're looking for
Yes.
that. So it's not really worth my time to, to most of the leads, don't apply to the type of thing I do. So luckily I've been able to be in a position on Fiverr where people are looking for, they type in funny or they type in, podcast theme and I'll come up and they can look at my work and, make a decision there if they want to do that or not. But it's really just Fiverr and then independent clients.
Okay. Oh, so independent as in they can come straight to you.
Yes.
And how would they do that? So if we've got listeners today that wanted to have like a small intro on their podcast, I'm trying to see what's the best way for it to be beneficial for you, because sometimes it may not be excellent going through Fiverr if they've come through our podcast and they've heard for you that actually, wait a minute, Fiverr didn't do any advertising. It's just we've heard from the podcast. So if I was to send them directly to you, would that be your website?
Well, I so appreciate that, and, but really Fiverr is
Okay.
still the
Okay.
best for, because as I was saying, the way that it sets up the protections, it gives the buyer the confidence and the seller the confidence that, everything will be there, and Fiverr's handles, credit card
Yeah.
payments and everything, and I just that way we can all just focus on,
Yes.
making sure the work is right. So if people are interested in getting jingles or theme songs done, then fiverr.com/Adam Blotner
After
is
you
the place to
after you
go.
hear my jingle, you're definitely gonna get one made. It sounds so nice. So that's something that would be nice.
Everybody needs a
Yes.
jingle.
Yeah, definitely. I'm surprised I didn't have one. I've been doing this for 15 years from
Wow.
YouTube, all sorts of different channels, and I've never really got this side of marketing until I've started working for myself. And now I have to have a budget for marketing, advertising, ads, marketing, making sure the brand name is right. It's surprising how important this is, because now this jingle will stick in people's head. They're going to be humming it, and then people want to listen to it more. So it's like, why not?
Totally.
And talk to me about Pop Filter. You appeared in Edinburgh Festival Fringe. This might be going back a little while, but I wanted to hear about this.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that was 2017. Not too far back.
It's 2023
Um,
now.
yeah, I know. It was so much fun. So out of the Groundlings, the experience I was talking about with the
Yeah.
the that sketch, I built a musical comedy act around that idea, around these fictional bands. How could I do a kind of knockoff, parody, satiric, not parody, but satirical,
Mhm.
based on the bands that I love to write songs in that style. And so I created over the years, it ended up being like 10 or 12 fictional bands that I have, at least 3 or 4 songs for each of these bands. And my wife, Jenny, is involved in this also. And I built up a band mostly of good friends, and we perform, all over. And we did a show at the Groundlings, and then we're doing shows in New York and the New York Fringe. And then I had heard a lot about the Edinburgh Fringe. Have you been?
No, I need to
Oh,
go.
you have to.
Yeah.
It's an incredible place. So we went there and brought our show there, and it is just a wonderful, community of artists and celebration of theater, and it's just a spectacular opportunity and great place.
Wow, that sounds great. I did hear your chaperone on YouTube, your video.
Yeah.
I was like, oh my God, you're actually very talented. Because
Oh, thank you.
that's a full on song.
Yeah.
And it's just it's very interesting how the internet works. People that are really good hardly make it at the top. I was hoping there'd be a couple of million views on that video, and I'm like, what? Why is this not up there? But uh,
Well, it was right at the time where internet consumption sort of changed to people wanted kind of no more than 30 seconds,
yeah,
and so producing a full length music video, people just, not a lot of people have the appetite to sit through all that. And but thank you. I'm glad you enjoyed it.
I really enjoyed speaking to you today. I think what we will do is I'll put all the information in the show notes so our guests can get over to you as well. So your Fiverr location will be there, your website will be there, so they can check out your work. What else are you? Where are you going next? What's your next big thing?
Uh, I don't know. I'm working on it. I really want to get into writing for television and writing, getting writing for things that are more ongoing. I've been enjoying sort of one off,
Yeah,
a plumbing jingle there,
yeah.
podcast jingle, but ongoing work. I really have always admired the work of a songwriter producer, Adam Schlesinger, who he was the executive music producer on Crazy Ex-Girlfriend, among many, many other things. And his big break was the movie That Thing You Do in the 90s with Tom Hanks. And he wrote that song. And so he was always a go-to guy in the industry for comedic, sort of where pop and comedy meet. And he unfortunately passed away in 2020. And it's just the kind of work that I've always admired him. And so I would love to get into TV work and doing those kinds of jobs.
Wow, that sounds great. I'm sure you will make it. You're a very dedicated individual and you're doing what you love. So keep at it, and I'm sure you
Thank
will
you.
be there. We are on season. Let me just check now because we're on season 16. No, episode 16, season 13. So I wanted to ask you a question that you would like to ask the next guest. You don't know who the next guest is. So what would be a
Okay.
question you would ask them? So I'm going to ask the next person that comes on.
Okay.
It could be anything.
Question for the next guest.
Yeah.
What's your favorite band?
Ooh. Okay, I've added that in my book. So the next guest I have, I'm going to ask him that question, and then I'm going to ask him at the end. You ask the next person a question. I heard this on another podcast. I thought, oh my god, that sounds so amazing. I want to do that.
Yeah,
So
that's fun.
we've started something today. It's you and me. This is the first time we're going to do it.
Okay. All right. I was gonna say,
Yeah,
there's not one queued up for
not
me.
yet. No,
Okay.
that's why I looked. I should have started this at the start of our season, but I was like, you know what, I'm just going to start it today.
Yeah. But I want to, if I can squeeze in
Yeah.
just to say, for people, building businesses and working for themselves, I
Mhm.
think if there's a piece of advice that I could have gone back and given
Yes.
myself was really like, I think that out of a lot of the things I did, Edinburgh Fringe or, Groundlings, whatever, I think I was always looking for big breaks. And when the big break wouldn't happen, I saw the experience as a failure. And and so that kind of took something out of me in terms of going to the next thing. And then as years went by, looking back, I saw that these really weren't failures at all. Each thing was building on the next thing. And as we were talking about earlier, it all fed to a larger um, thing. So I think there's so much that's within your control, and there's so much that's not in your control. And I think to for each thing you do, create a goal of something that you can control, and be clear about what your goal is to get out of that experience. And if something that's out of your control happens too, then that's great. And if it doesn't, you can at least know you were successful at the thing that you were trying to do. And if you weren't successful at that, it was only your own fault, and you can figure out what didn't work and what can I change for the next thing. And so I think changing the terms of what success and failure are for each of your endeavors, can help build you up along the way.
Wow, that's some amazing points to end on. And also, if you don't succeed at the thing you wanted to do, it's probably because something else was waiting for you that's bigger and better. So sometimes
Absolutely.
you may not do well here, but you'll find out, wait a minute, I've done really well on this thing that I didn't think I'll do. Then pursue that and keep at it. So, Adam, I want to say
Absolutely.
thank you very much for joining me. It's been a real pleasure getting you on and speaking to you, getting inside your mind a little bit about how you work. And hopefully, we'll catch up again to see how you proceed. And when you're on TV, don't forget us small people.
Yes. All right. Same. Thank you. This was really fun. Thank you for having me.
This has been zulftalks.com. You will find all the information in the show notes, so please do check that out. And also check out Adam's gig if you're looking to get some jingles made. I'll see you on the next episode. zulftalks.com.